Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here, and this time we're bringing you the episode 2 of Top 5 versus Who Would Win matchups, but we're doing it here in the Red Host home over on my channel instead of over on Turin's, and of course we'll be alternating from week to week, so you won't have to get too used to us being in the same place, and we'll be doing little experiments to sort of spice things up every week. And of course, we'll be looking at the suggestions that you guys leave down in the comments. So before we dive into the matchups, if there's a particular matchup you want to see, feel free to post it down in the comment section below. That way we can take a look at it for potentially next week. And of course, when we go over all of the matchups, if you'd be so kind as to let us know who you think would win in each round before we reveal our answers, I'd love to hear them. But in any event, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Turin, who's going to take us into our first matchup for today.
So the first matchup of the day is going to be a Clash of the Titans, two of Warhammer Fantasy Battle's greatest, I guess, I don't know if I would call them villains. I don't really know how to articulate what they truly are, but we have Helm and Gorst. Facing off against Heinrich Kemmler. So Sotek, tell us the tale of the tape, and how would this showdown go?
Sure, I think showdown might be a little too dramatic of a word for what this will probably end up looking like. But before we get into it, I'm assuming you have a prediction on this one, though I could probably guess who it is.
I don't know. Like, I know the correct answer, but every ounce of my fiber wants to pull for Helm and Gorst. Just he's got his brothers with him. He's got his cart. I don't know how the cart's going to really, probably if anything, will slow him down and make him weaker. I don't know. Let's just go with Gorst. Screw it. I'm picking Gorst, man.
All right, well, I can certainly appreciate you wanting to stick out for the underdog here, but unfortunately it is not a good redemption story for poor old Gorst. Unfortunately for Gorst, he's just kind of not that impressive on a notable level. The most interesting thing about Gorst, for those who don't know about where he came from, because it's kind of a mystery to people who aren't super into Warhammer Fantasy, especially at its end, was that there was a campaign put out before the end times that was sort of like a prequel. And it was basically Manfred von Karstein versus Volkmar the Grim. And Helm Gorst featured as a minor character that you would get playing the Vampire Count side. He was kind of like an acolyte for Manfred. But his whole claim to fame was that he had a stronger than average corpse cart, and he had this nifty book that could kind of like fart out a random spell from the lore of vampires. And that was it. That's all he had going for him. And his rival was a witch hunter, not like a lord or anything super spectacular.
Who ends up winning there between him and the witch hunter?
So between him and the witch hunter, funny enough, if I remember the story correctly, the witch hunter ended up defeating him. And
got it. Okay.
Gorst also died in the events of Sigmar's Blood. He did not survive the expansion. Only Manfred and the Devils of Schwarzhofen did, which all of the Regiments of Renown from the Gurn in the Grave are also from that book. But in any event, the way this matchup would basically go is that Heinrich Kemmler would see Gorst, and if he decided to not just instantly obliterate him using magic, what I presume would happen is Gorst would whip at his brothers and chant for them to move forward, and they would start shambling forward, and then Kemmler would just completely usurp his power over his brothers and probably make them turn around and kill Gorst. And it would be, I don't even think Kemmler would honestly need to like get himself physically involved, even though he's much better at fighting than Helm Gorst is.
Yeah.
It would be
tragic ending.
Yeah, like at least with Khazrak versus Orion, Khazrak had some cool redeeming factors that like had the potential. I don't really think there's any scenario at all that Gorst would win this matchup unless like it was purely based on weight or something, like just a ridiculous off to the side way to win, like a Mario Party minigame.
So you're essentially saying that Heinrich Kemmler could essentially seize control of Gorst's minions, being his own brothers, and could essentially just turn them on Gorst. And essentially, he could overpower any of Gorst's magic with his own.
Oh, yeah. Or, he could just walk up to the corpse cart and kill them all with the Chaos Tomb Blade without trying that hard. Like, Kemmler could easily shank them to death in a dark alley.
I could just imagine, like, Gorst with his, like, whip, just, like, whipping at Heinrich Kemmler, who has this, like, crazy Tomb Blade, and oh my god, that's so funny. So yeah, would you say with a resounding yes that the victor would be the good old Kemmler, man?
Oh yes, I would say with a very resounding success.
Flawless victory. You suck.
The Lichmaster would now be called the Gorstmaster, although I don't think he would actually add that to his resume.
Probably not worth it. Well, a very conclusive first round. A big upset. Helman Gorst, of course, a fan favorite. I feel like he would probably get spanked in Total War Warhammer 2. But we're here in the second round, which is going to be a showdown between Kholek Suneater and Durthu. This one was highly requested in the last video, and I'm gonna have to go with my boy Kholek. I'm a big Chaos fan, so that's my prediction here. And what do you got for us, man?
All right, we probably should have saved the Battle of the Titans for this one, though I don't certainly see the use of it in the one before this match. But in any event,
Yeah.
This is actually a pretty interesting battle because we have two insanely ancient, colossal beings going up against each other. There are very few people in the Warhammer world who are either as large, as strong, or as old as both Durthu and Kholek Suneater. Kholek is actually a bit older than Durthu, as Durthu was one of the original forest spirits that was placed by the Old Ones. He didn't know the Old Ones, but they had a hand in creating Athelloren. And Durthu is the one of two remaining elders. Now, the thing that's interesting about this matchup is they're both very big. They both have kind of some interesting gimmicks. You know, Kholek has a storm that constantly follows him around that he can hurl lightning out of, or he can even hit himself with the lightning to give himself a little bit of extra juice if he needs to keep fighting.
Yeah. Jumper cables.
Which is why, funny enough, a lot of people may wonder why Kholek actually wears all of his armor. His armor is actually made of brass, and the reason he wears it isn't for protection. It's so that he's able to channel more lightning into himself, and it makes him a more attractive target for random straying bolts of lightning. That's actually why he wears it.
That's so heavy metal. That's so great.
Like he wants to get hit by lightning because it's kind of like for him it's like popping a Viagra essentially, but for fighting.
Fair play.
In any event, Durthu on the other hand has the ability to wield magic, though he doesn't consciously do it. It's kind of more something that he has the ability to do, but he hasn't really tapped into it. There is actually a part of the end times where Durthu manages to basically unlock his full potential, being one of the Ancients of Athelloren, and he gains the full power to wield the magic of the forest, and a bunch of other stuff. But obviously we're not going to be using that form of Durthu because we're disallowing end times characters or stats and even storylines from these duels, because in the end times a lot of characters became very inconsistent with their prior lore, and some of them just went to truly absurd power levels. Maybe we'll do a special edition sometime on the end times.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
But in any event, so you have Durthu, who, like I said, his magic's kind of beneath the surface, but it does basically manifest as him buffing himself using the Wind of Beasts. And then he has these sprites, which are these little spirit things that are basically his agony and his hatred given physical form by the magic that's embodied in them, and they basically lash out at people and just rip the warmth and life out of them and choke them to death on just agony and bitterness.
That's nice.
That's his
Rivals
Lamentation
of
of Despair's ability. But
who is more bitter, Durthu or the dwarves?
Oh, Durthu. Durthu is way more bitter just because he's been alive longer. Dwarves have to remember past their bitterness from generation to generation. Durthu's just been holding on to that.
Yeah, for all eternity. That's pretty funny.
In any event, they both also bring giant weapons. You know, Kholek does have his colossal hammer Starcrusher, which is absurd, but Durthu has the Sword of Daith, which was forged by Daith, who's the avatar of the elven god Vol. So it's a horribly potent weapon, and both of their weapons would be unable to destroy each other, so it just kind of comes down to a good old-fashioned fist fight of two kaiju wailing on each other until one of them breaks.
Yeah.
In the end, though, looking at their feats and looking at what they've managed to accomplish in their lives, I will say that although it kind of pains me in a sense to declare it, I actually do have to go with Kholek on this one.
Oh, yeah.
Kholek Suneater is not only a titan, he's vaguely similar in size to Durthu, but the thing about Kholek is the only time we've seen him in a scenario where he hasn't been completely obliterating the competition was when a bunch of High Elf mages basically ambushed him and sealed him in a giant glacier. Durthu, on the other hand, has been brought to his knees by Heinrich Kemmler, just bombarding him with magic. Oh yeah, granted,
Damn.
Kemmler was on a high at that particular point and was juiced up considerably, but still. You know, we have Durthu, who is a formidable force, but was capable of getting overwhelmed by dwarves, which is why part of his face has been hacked off.
Oh, that was the dwarves who did that?
Yeah, that was the dwarves who did it. He hates them. That actually happened before the wood elves joined Atholoran, when it was like just the forest spirits. The forest spirits were getting overwhelmed by the dwarves, their fire and their axes, and
Their industry, and yeah.
some lucky slayers, I suppose, or just some dwarves with axes that he tried to pick up and throw or something managed to chop off part of his face.
Oh, gosh.
But
That's so brutal.
oh yeah, it's terrible. Funny enough, it's actually kind of melted and it's more of a molten core beneath it. Total War Warhammer doesn't quite have the engine to render that properly, but if you ever go look at his like official artwork, it's kind of messed up. It's very painful looking. In any event, Kholek, though, the thing that really puts him ahead is what he did at Prague, which was when Azavar Kul invaded the south, Kholek literally walked up to the walls of Prague, which had been impregnable for thousands of years and had resisted countless chaos invasions, and with a single swing, he literally flattened a portion of it and just ripped the walls open.
Damn, what book is that? Is that from a particular book, or is that...
Unfortunately not. The Adventures of Azavar Kul, if you want to call them that, his invasion, it's vaguely detailed, and there are even some video games that take place immediately afterwards or immediately before, but there's never been for some reason, there's never been a book by Games Workshop or any official lore or anything that is explicitly focused on that invasion. Like even the upcoming game Chaos Bane, for instance, is taking place immediately after Azavar Kul was defeated, which by that point Kholek had already run off and gone home.
So he just flattens the wall of the city, and I assume it just falls after that. Like the rest of the Chaos forces pile in, and
Kholek smashes the wall open. They all run inside. Kholek goes to the temple district and smashes every single god's temple because he's just angry all the time. And then he immediately left and went back north.
It's like the Chaos Hulk, just like just big
and
brute.
Azavar Kul made the horrible decision to keep invading without him and proceeded to die at Kislev.
Should have brought Kholek. That was his biggest mistake. So Kholek is going to be our champ here in the second round of today's video.
Impressive. Defeated.
So I'm excited to hear that. But from what you articulated about his feats and his accomplishments, like just literally being this force that even the high elf mages couldn't essentially defeat him, right? They had to trap him.
I will say, in Durthu's defense, Durthu would horribly mangle Kholek before Kholek killed him. I think Kholek would definitely win, but Durthu is actually surprisingly, Durthu is much faster than Kholek, because Kholek is slow. He is super slow. And Durthu would probably cripple him easily.
Yeah.
But I don't think Durthu would be able to kill him.
Yeah, it's a good fight. It's a good old-fashioned slobber knocker, as they say, which is good. It's what we're here for. And I think the next one is right up that same alley. So for the third match of the day,
Round 3.
we do have Settra the Imperishable
Settra the Imperishable
versus Abhorash.
Blood Knights.
So this is going to be a good one. So, man, I really don't know a lot about these characters. I know there's I don't think Abhorash is, does he have any representation in Total War Warhammer? I mean, he's mentioned, right? Isn't he the father of the Blood Dragon vampires or something like that?
Yes, so Abhorash is the original founder of the Blood Dragon line, while we have Settra the Imperishable, who's the first of the Tomb Kings. Both are kind of the apex when it comes to martial combat of their species, with Abhorash being the apex vampire and Settra, of course, being the apex Tomb King. The ways they were formed are very different, and their styles are very different. But Abhorash is a character that is very famous within Games Workshop lore, but he never got explicitly focused on. Unfortunately, because there was essentially a trilogy they released that was supposed to be all about the founding vampires, and they finished the first 2 books, and the third book was supposed to be explicitly about Abhorash, and it never got finished and released because the end times happened.
Yeah, that's super depressing.
Oh, it's horrible. Really yes. The first book was about Neferata. The second book focused more on Ushoran and Wazoran. And then the third book just didn't happen.
That's so depressing. That makes me sad. And I wasn't even really invested in that, narrative there. But that is quite sad. But my prediction before we get rolling is going to be Settra. I'm going with the chariot master himself. Hopefully Abhorash is run beneath his spokes. But so tell us the tale of the tape here.
All right, going with the Kemmler gang, I think is what the Total War threads are calling, the memes are calling them right now. In any
Okay.
event, so this is actually a really cool matchup because both of these characters are incredibly powerful. Abhorash, one of the reasons he's kind of a fan favorite and he has a bit of a cult following is that he has this really legendary epic about how he never wanted to be a vampire and he tried to resist the urge of thirsting for blood, and it ended up making him go crazy and he killed a bunch of people and he felt really bad about it. He was kind of like he was like the OG Bretonnian. He was Bretonnian before Bretonnians existed. He was very honorable, and that was kind of his whole shtick. But he ends up becoming quite the monster later in life, and ends up battling a dragon in a very famous battle where he basically fights I think it was a black dragon in the mountains, the World's Edge Mountains, and they have this epic duel that lasts for days, I think. And Abhorash kills it in single combat, and then drinks its blood, and it cures him of the vampiric curse and makes him even stronger. And by that point, his myth kind of devolves into a series of legends and folktales and such, with little snippets of truth here and there. But in any event, on the other hand, we've got Settra. Settra was a colossus of a man. I mean, the Nehekarans in general were much stronger, much taller, and just more physically powerful than regular humans. They were kind of like the early humans, but instead of being like, they were like a more perfect form, and humanity has sort of downgraded a little bit since then as it went further north.
They're like the engineers in the Alien series, right?
Not quite
Kinda
to
like
that
these-
extent, but yes,
Okay.
they're still like recognizably human. They're just a little bit bigger than you would probably expect on average.
Got it.
But in any event, Settra was like a monster compared to most people. Lived his entire life being a warrior priest king on the front lines, being a badass, and then he died at a very old age because death was the one foe he couldn't conquer, and it made him super pissed off, so he was really stubborn about dying until much later. But then, of course, he got brought back on accident he didn't actually get brought back by Nagash. He was resurrected by Kotep directly, which made him super upset because he was pissed he didn't come back as an immortal golden god. Came back as a mummy, and he did not appreciate that.
Yeah.
But in any event, we have two characters who are easily the most martially powerful of their kind. Abhorash is the strongest vampire in a purely martial sense, though he is not gifted as a wizard at all. He's probably the weakest caster of the 5 original vampire lords that are worth talking about, but so is Settra in a sense. Settra, funny enough, is the most gifted caster of the Tomb Kings, but that's because he's the only Tomb King that can cast magic. Settra was, of course, very jealous of the Lich Priests in that they were good at magic and he wasn't, but he was so horribly stubborn and strong-willed that he managed to force himself to learn a little bit of magic. That way they wouldn't have power over him. He basically learned enough that if they tried to extort him for magic, he could, block their magic and then rip them limb from limb, which he has done numerous times in stories. He has no problem butchering Lich Priests for mouthing off to him. In any event, though, this battle is tricky because Settra, we have a very detailed history of the kind of items he brings to the table, all this stuff. Abhorash doesn't have those advantages. Abhorash has a lot of cool legends. We know that he fought Gilles Le Breton, and he actually lost that duel against the founder of Bretonia, and became very good friends with him. He even swore a vow to Gilles Le Breton, and they were kind of friends, but Abhorash kind of kept an eye on Bretonia. Granted, he ended up sort of also creating the Red Duke, which was kind of a dick move for Bretonia, but they can't all be winners. Yeah. In any event, though, at the end of the day, I have to say that I fairly strongly feel that I have to go with Settra. Both of them are very powerful physically. They're both very durable physically, but Settra is just a beast who is kitted out with some just crazy items at his disposal. Abhorash, to the stories we have, doesn't have a famous iconic weapon, doesn't have a famous iconic blade or suit of armor. In many of his appearances, he shows up looking very different depending on where he's living at the time. I wouldn't be surprised that if Games Workshop had fleshed him out, they would have kitted him out with some iconic weapons from his days in Lamia, but that never happened. So instead, we are pitting him up against a guy who was so powerful, he was able to force the Nehekaran pantheon to bend to him. He made gods recognize him practically as a god which is why he has a chariot that's like always on fire, and he has the ability to
Chariot of
wield
the
this. You know, he has a spear, halberd, sword blade thing that has the power of the sun and can just blind people and light them on fire. And he's, of course, got his Usurian's brooch, which is this horribly powerful magic item from the god of the underworld in Nehekara.
That sounds pretty OP.
Usurian, yeah, and it was why Nagash could not beat Settra. Nagash threw everything he had at Settra. He called in the vampires, the ones he was able to get control of. He went out there and fought him himself, and Settra kicked the crap out of Nagash because Nagash couldn't beat him. The Usurian brooch made Settra basically impervious to magic, and in combat, there is nobody who can best Settra easily. And I think at the end of the day, Abhorash just doesn't really have anything of note that he could bring that would allow him to overcome Settra's slew of magical items that just enhance his strength, which, you know, Settra is like as strong as a dragon and tougher than an ogre if he's by himself on foot naked. But, you know, when you give him all his magic items, like the Chariot of the Gods alone would be a huge trial for Abhorash to take down. I have no doubt that Abhorash could do it, take down the Chariot of the Gods, but that would just, he would probably be wounded trying to do so, and it would just make Settra super pissed. And I think, honestly, Settra would just tear him apart eventually. I think Abhorash would be much faster than Settra. I think Abhorash would be a little bit more skilled than Settra, but I think Settra would be able to just brute force him down, and his magical items would just be an impervious defense that Abhorash just can't get through. No amount of skill is going to get you past the Blessed Blade of Batra and the Scarab Brooch of Usurian. It's just not going to happen.
Man, hearing all that makes me want to go play like a quick battle right now and just whip out Settra. But yeah, that's going to be it for our third showdown. Settra taking the big victory there.
Superb. Fatality.
Definitely, you know, and Settra has quite a following as well. I mean, Settra was always a very popular character, right, in Warhammer Fantasy Battles.
Oh,
and,
yes,
you know,
but there's
the
going
lore
to be
and
at
everything.
least 100 comments telling me I'm an idiot for going up again, for not declaring Abhorash.
Got it. Well, we'll see. We will see. Time will tell, my friend. And here we go.
Round 4.
On to the fourth pick, which is going to be a showdown that actually does exist in the current game. You can see it quite a bit. We have High King Thorgrim
Thorgrim Grudgebearer.
facing off against Lord Skrolk,
Lord Skrolk.
the filthiest of all rats. So tell us a little bit about these characters, how they come across in lore, and who would be the ultimate winner here.
All right, so those of you who are familiar with Total War Warhammer know that Thorgrim is, of course, the High King of the Dwarves. He has a very, very powerful kit of magic items, most of which were bestowed upon the High Kings previous and have been passed down through the line. And he, of course, rides the Throne of Power, which is the most powerful artifact that the Dwarven race has. And it's so powerful that the rune protecting it, the Rune of Azamar, also known as the Rune of Eternity to some, is so strong that only one of it can exist in the world at a time. If another one was forged, there would not be enough magic to sustain it, and it would crack.
Jeez.
In any event, though, yeah, it's a ridiculous thing. And it's so strong that the dwarves, when Grugni, the ancestor god, forged it, he basically told the dwarves if it ever cracked and faded, the dwarven race was doomed. So
Jeez.
it's
So
a pretty...
Thorgrim rides on that?
Huh?
He rides on that thing?
Oh, yeah, that's what he rides on. Yep.
Okay.
The
got
Rune
it.
of Azamar is... I don't know if... I think it's in game, but it's the little rune that's carved behind his head on, like, the back of the seat.
Got it.
But in any event, then we have Lord Skrolk, which Skrolk is more sinister than I think many people realize he is. Skrolk is old. We're talking probably in the thousands of years old, which, for the record, most Skaven, an old Skaven is like 13 years old. Skrolk is,
Jeez.
Queek Headtaker, for instance, at his height was about 4.
Wait, you're
And-
saying 4 years old?
Yes, 4 years old.
So that's so trippy. It's like
Yeah, well, they're rats.
yeah, I guess they're rats, right? Yeah.
But Skrolk has been this walking contagion creature on the planet for at least centuries, and he is horribly infected, but by numerous, countless diseases, infections, buboes, you name it. But much like the warriors of Nurgle, these pestilences have only strengthened him and made him tougher and stronger. And the thing about Skrolk that's actually very famous is he's very, very fast. A lot of people see him and they just see like this goofy little cripple who's blind. But
It's like Palpatine.
yes, but Skrolk is noted as being so swift that there is no known creature that can basically outspeed him. Like, he can easily catch flies out of the air, though of course in all of his stories it makes a note that despite the fact he can do that, he's never been able to actually enjoy the process of doing it, because any fly that gets too close to him just rots into ash immediately from all the putrescence above him.
Yeah, jeez.
So he's just this walking aura of death, and he has some horribly hilarious but also disturbing stories about his fighting style. Or whenever like assassins go after him, all he'll do is he'll open his plague sensor and just let out these fumes that are so poisonous and deadly that anyone who's not a plague monk that tries to get close to him will literally choke and die, and their body will go into seizures and paralysis before they can get to him. So he just sits there and waits, and just walking up to him will kill you.
Jeez.
He's very dangerous. And
is he as fast as like an elf, for example?
Not quite, but just about.
Okay.
Which, considering how strong he is and how tough he is pretty spooky. He doesn't have much in the way of armor or protection. He pretty much relies on his aura of pestilence and his ability to basically rot everything that gets near him away to kind of keep him safe, while using his magic, and then of course if he gets close enough to you, to unleash his horrible plague sensor. And of course he does have the Liber Bubonicus as a kind of a last resort if he needs it, which the Liber Bubonicus are kind of like a series of sacred tomes to Clan Pestilence that contain not only the names of countless diseases that they've invented, but supposedly they even contain the names of everyone who has or is dying from those diseases. They're kind of these creepy prophetic books, which is why whenever you click on Skrolk in Total War Warhammer, he'll say something like, "I'll find your name in the Liber Bubonicus," or something like that.
I was wondering about that.
It's kind of like a Death Note, in a sense.
Got it.
If you've
That's
ever
like
seen
the
that
reverse
anime.
of Thorgrim's book. That makes this matchup even more thematic.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
The
Book of Grudges
versus the Book of Grudges.
Yeah.
So,
awesome.
basically what this fight comes down to is, can Skrolk's magic and all of his really nasty artifacts and just his natural aura, can he rot away Thorgrim's defenses until he can basically force him into a foot fight and kill him? Now, Skrolk has done some amazing things in his time. I've read stories that he is literally one-shot, like rat ogres and colossal monsters. He hits them with his flail and they instantly wither up into a shriveled husk and die. It's a horribly powerful weapon. But on the other hand, we got Thorgrim, who we know for a fact is wielding at least 2 artifacts of 2 different ancestor gods. He's, of course, got the Throne of Power from Grugni, and he has the Axe of Grimnir, which is, of course, one of Grimnir's 2 legendary axes. So at the end of the day, though, when looking at the 2 of these and their feats and how they've performed, I'm actually, despite the fact I've talked him up quite a bit, I would have to give the win to Thorgrim. Skrolk's items and his abilities are very, very good at rotting anything in the material world away, and he's a very gifted magic user, so it's not really a big deal to him, even if a caster manages to defend themselves from his natural aura. He can usually use enough magic to either overwhelm you or at least close the distance and kill you himself in close combat. The problem is, Thorgrim is one of the toughest nuts to crack in Warhammer Fantasy. There are greater demons that have hurled themselves at him sitting on the Throne of Power, and he doesn't even bother to get up. He just waits until they run into its aura of power that surrounds it, and then he will casually lean over and stab them in the face with the Axe of Grimnir.
Awesome. Yeah.
Or we even have stories of there has been creatures like a wyvern attacked him once, and he not only casually leaned out of the way as it tried to bite him, but then he picked up the Book of Grudges and brained it. Because the Book of Grudges
He just crushes it with the Book of Grudges.
It's this giant, like, iron-bound book full of heavy pages, all written in king's blood, and he just smacks him on the head. Or there's a story, if you read the book Thorgrim, there's even a story of orcs trying to jump on the Throne of Power, and he's literally beating people to death with the book. Because he's, like, in the middle of trying to read it. Thorgrim is very patient, very cunning, The only way I could possibly see Thorgrim losing the scenario is Thorgrim does kind of get a little prideful sometimes, and there have been times where he has gotten off the throne of power to fight someone in personal combat because he doesn't consider them worthy of approaching the throne of power and doesn't like to rely on its defense all the time.
Yeah.
That's how he killed Gorfang Rotgut, the Lord of the King of Blackcrag, was that he casually walked off his throne and went and killed him. But that being said, he's only done that 2 times, and one of the times was in sort of a pre-end time scenario, and the other time was during the end time. So I don't think that's typically how he fights. And if he saw someone like Skrolk, there's no way Thorgrim would get off his throne. He'd probably just tell his things to run him over. That being said, I do think that Skrolk would kill all of the throne bearers who carry Thorgrim's throne, and Skrolk would probably unleash all of his power, including his Staff of Corruption and the Liber Bubonicus against the Throne of Power, trying to kill Thorgrim. But as long as Thorgrim is seated on the Throne of Power, no way in hell is Skrolk going to be able to take him down. It's just too powerful of a throne. And knowing Skrolk, he would probably try and get close enough to use the Rod of Corruption to destroy it, and the instant he got that close, Thorgrim is terrifyingly fast. A lot of people don't think he is, because they just see an old dwarf who rarely nudges out of his seat, but the reason he does that is because he's patient and he waits for an opening. But the second you give him one, he is lightning fast. And he is one of the strongest and most skilled warriors in the Dwarven Kingdoms. According to, there's a famous quote from Thorgrim where he tells Belegar Ironhammer when they're talking that the bards sing that Belegar Ironhammer is the best duelist in the Dwarven Empire behind only Ungrim Ironfist, and Thorgrim's only retort is that he finds that insulting.
Oh, man. Do you think, so would Thorgrim just like grab Skrolk and just snap his neck, or would he use his axe?
He certainly could. I honestly think he would use the Axe of Grimnir to probably cut down the Staff of Corruption, and the instant Skrolk loses the Staff of Corruption, he is in deep crap. Like, he's a fairly skilled fighter because he's a plague monk, or a super hyped up plague priest, but he cannot go to, he doesn't wear armor. He doesn't have some kind of like fancy mind-blowing agility to like dodge attacks in midair like Deathmaster Snitch. He would literally just stand there being like, oh crap, before Thorgrim casually killed him whatever way he deemed appropriate. Yeah, Thorgrim sounds like a beast, man. Do you think Thorgrim, if he were to step off his altar, he would still, not his altar, but his throne, would still essentially have a better chance of winning than Skrolk? Yes. The armor of Skaldor, even without his armor is also insanely runecrafted. And there's there's only 2 weapons I've ever read about in the history of Warhammer Fantasy that were able to pierce Thorgrim's armor, and I don't think Skrolk possesses an item that is on par with them. Got it. Fair play. So that's going to be our champ for the 4th showdown of the day. We have High King Thorgrim with the decisive victory over Lord Skrolk.
Well done. Fatality.
Okay, now we're going to be closing out with a pretty fun matchup.
Round 5.
We have Volkmar the Grim.
Volkmar the Grim.
Facing off against Krell. And I'm going to have to go with Volkmar for my guest today. So what do we got for us? So this one's pretty fun. And it's kind of a rematch if you believe in like kind of a reincarnation or like passing down the torch to a younger generation. What some people might not know is Volkmar is actually a direct descendant of Sigmar Heldenhammer. Because Sigmar had 2 sons that Sigmar didn't know about. But long story short, Volkmar is one of the descendants of that line. And he is very, very scary. Granted, he's getting on in years, and he's not quite as fast as he used to be. But the nifty thing that he's got is the War Altar of Sigmar. Which the War Altar is such a impressive display of faith and holy power that it literally juices up Volkmar to essentially be where he was when he was young. So he's super strong, and he can wield his Staff of Authority like it's basically a giant lance or just an iron pole to beat people to death with. Because it's technically supposed to be more of a symbol of office, but Volkmar uses it primarily as a weapon. Okay. Because that's his version of being in office, is beating people to death. But Krell, who fought Sigmar Heldenhammer
a long time ago at the Battle of the River Reich, and then later at the Battle of Glacier Lake, which is where you find Krell if you play Total War Warhammer, because that's where Sigmar beat him finally. Krell is, well, if you've watched my Heinrich Kemmler lore video, you should know that Krell is a monster. Like, this is a guy who was incredibly dangerous in life. He was responsible for 2 very, very prominent dwarf holds falling into ruin and being overtaken, because he was just a complete monster. Because he has this horrifying axe, the Black Axe of Krell, that has this sinister ability that every time he strikes you with it, basically anytime it hits flesh or clashes against a weapon, it basically shivers and all these weird, like, very, very tiny black shards fall off of it. And they're tiny enough that you can, like, inhale them while you're fighting them, because there will be, like, a cloud of dust, or what looks like dust, but it'll actually be these little shards. Or if he cuts into you, these shards, what they'll do is if you inhale them or they get into a wound, they're sentient, and they start burrowing into your flesh, and they basically try and get into your bloodstream, and then
That's
they
horrible.
sail through your bloodstream until they reach your heart, and then they'll pierce your heart and kill you.
Damn, that's pretty OP.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying, and it's agonizing. It's an agonizing process. It's very extremely detailed in the book Zombie Slayer, if anyone ever wants to read that. In any event, however, that usually instantly wins the fight for Krell, because he's an undead white, and he's a powerful white at that. And he is very durable. It is hard as hell to kill Krell, because he's lightning fast, he's very skilled. You know, he was one of the greatest champions of Khorne during his life. You know, he was on the cusp of being a demon prince before he fell to Grimble Ironhelm, who was the legendary dwarf hero that killed him in single combat. And he's only gotten stronger in death, you know. He's gotten a little slower, but he's gotten a lot stronger. On the other hand, Volkmar, the thing that saves Volkmar and actually makes this an interesting fight is the Jade Griffin, which is, of course, an artifact that Volkmar wears around his neck, and it's another holy artifact that basically uses the power of his faith in Sigmar to constantly purify his body and re-knit open wounds and basically constantly be healing him and keeping him alive. Now, the funny thing is that if Krell struck Volkmar, which he almost certainly would, because Volkmar is not as good of a combatant as Krell is in a traditional sense, I don't think the Black Shards would be able to kill Volkmar, because I think his body would purify them either by pushing them out or disintegrating them with heat, or simply just stalling them so they couldn't dig into his flesh and kill him. So he doesn't have to worry about the shards. However, the thing about these battles that we've of course discussed is that the characters bring all their equipment, and Volkmar has that frickin' chariot of his, you know, the Pope Mobile, the War Altar of Sigmar, which is a horribly strong artifact. It is very impressive. It's one of the most amazing constructions the Empire has ever managed. It was built during the time of after Magnus the Pious, and it's like this supercharged battle relic of holy insanity. And it gives Volkmar some insane powers, because not only does it boost up his strength, but it also gives him the ability to basically redirect his faith into a weapon, which in Total War Warhammer is represented by the Banishment spell. Now, the thing that makes Banishment exceedingly dangerous in this particular matchup is that against most enemies, it's a dangerous spell, and that, you know, it's not actually a vortex. Traditionally, the way it works in the lore is it literally banishes you. It's like this big influx of light magic that just sears your flesh from your bones and purifies you to death. Like, it just evaporates everything impure about you. But it's very, very specialized and good against things that are unnatural in this world. So demons and undead. So the moment that Volkmar saw Krell, probably one of the opening stages of the fight is that he would unleash the full might of the War Altar as a banishment, and it would Shrek the hell out of Krell. Wouldn't kill him, but the thing about Krell is whenever Krell gets hit by a really powerful magic attack, as we've seen happen to him numerous times in stories, is that Krell starts to get really slow, because all of the magic that's basically holding him together and animating him starts to ravel away. And as Krell would get slower, Volkmar with his staff would essentially be able to fight him and take him on even ground, but only on the War Altar. If Krell managed to destroy the War Altar, which I don't think he would be able to do after he ate a full banishment, because he doesn't have any anti-magic. Like, there's nothing Krell can do.
He just has to eat it.
Yeah, he just has to take it in this sort of matchup. You know, he doesn't have Kemmler here to provide anti-magic for him, which is a critical part of what Krell needs. And so, because of that banishment, I think the War Altar would be the triumph that would put Volkmar ahead of Krell. I think if the War Altar didn't have the ability to unleash a spell that's specifically designed to destroy undead and demons, I think Volkmar would lose this matchup, because Krell is just a terrifying champion, even though Volkmar could theoretically and more than likely survive the Black Axe of Krell. I don't think he'd be able to martially overwhelm Krell. But with the War Altar at his side, nah, I don't think Krell would be able to stop him.
So that's going to be the winner. For number 5, we have Volkmar the Grim with the victory, of course, with the War Altar. But again, all of our duels, all the characters get to bring their mounts and their weapons and pretty much all of their goodies to the cockfight here. So, Volkmar the Grim, the winner.
Excellent. Brutality.
Of our 5th and final showdown. So yeah, definitely, we had some upsets today, I think, a little bit. I think the Kholek Durthu matchup was pretty fun. And of course, good old Helm and Gorst getting stomped by Heinrich Kemmler. Always a good time. But, oh yeah, always fun stuff. So yes, guys.
Speaking of upsets, I do want to make a quick note. I, of course, go through and read all the comments on these videos, because I'm curious what people are saying, and it's very entertaining to see the people, you know, reading all the comments, especially about, like, Grimgor versus Tyrion, was really fun, because there are a lot of very opinionated people in those arguments, and it was a great read. But there was a lot of comments about Archaon versus Malekith, and I wanted to actually address those, because I think there's something I didn't communicate as well as I should have in the video, which is that a lot of people were talking about one of two things. Either A, that on tabletop, Archaon can put Malekith in a trash can, which I want to say, yes, that is true. If Archaon gets into a challenge with Malekith, he would absolutely dumpster him and put him in a trash can, no questions asked. 10 attacks, ignores armor save, I believe he'd be hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, and Malekith wouldn't get a save against it, because his armor doesn't provide save against magical. You know, I could go on for a while, but yes, you're right. Archaon would win that. But that's assuming, of course, that Malekith goes in and fights a challenge, which he's probably not going to do when Archaon is a superior physical combatant. But the main thing is that for these matchups, we're not using tabletop as our guide. It's something that I look at, and it's something that I consider, you know, not necessarily in a pure stat sense, although I do look at them and take that into my consideration, but more, you know, I go through all the army books and read everybody's stories and kind of flick through their personal epics and such. And the thing that I really want to elaborate why I said Malekith beat Archaon is that in the video, I think I went a little too hard on Destroyer being able to disable magic items. Which a lot of people, I will say you were totally right in calling me out on that, in that if he was trying to use Destroyer to win alone, Archaon would tear him apart. What I should have focused more on the fact is that Malekith has a dragon that allows him to fly around and pick the battle when it most favors him, and that Malekith is a much superior caster to Archaon. And you have to remember that in Warhammer Fantasy, in the lore, which is primarily the kind of matchups we're looking at here, magic is much more powerful in the lore than it is represented in Total War Warhammer or tabletop for balance reasons. But Archaon was not a gifted wizard. In his personal sagas, which you can read, Archaon and then Archaon, I think the second one was called like Lord of the End Times, or The Ruinous King or something, and then there was a End Times novel about him, which is technically the third of the trilogy, but it doesn't really fit. But the first 2 books I really recommend of Archaon's saga, and they tell a really interesting story about him. But one of the things that you'll notice when you read through Archaon's saga is that he's very vulnerable to magic. There are numerous times throughout the story where he basically gets bamboozled or just outright defeated by powerful casters because he doesn't have a way to deal with them. Now, when he gets the Eye of Shirian during his epic, he gains the ability to essentially see the winds of magic, but he very rarely uses that ability, and he still gets pretty badly beat by people who are very gifted magic users, and he has to kind of rely on lieutenants or other generals who are very good magic users to allow him to get close and finish the battle. Archaon is kind of like the supreme delegator, so that he can get in close and beat you to death, which he is a fantastic fighter. Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify that I think if it was just we put them together, Malekith wasn't allowed to like reposition or fly around, and they just had to fight each other physically with their magic items, Archaon wins, no question. But I think looking at the grand scope, especially from a lore perspective, when you have someone like Malekith who is so strong with magic that he can easily subdue characters like Nakari, the greatest keeper of secrets, or he's been able to deal with demons like Kugoth Plaguefather, one of the strongest Great Unclean Ones, and he was even able to magically obliterate Skarbrand, the strongest of the Bloodthirsters in Warhammer Fantasy until the end times happen, but we're not including that. You know, you have a character who magically would be able to just overwhelm and tear Archaon apart. But it's fine to disagree with me. I just wanted to explain that one a little better.
Yeah, it's fair play, man. It was definitely quite a fun video. That's one of the best things about this series is getting to see all the feedback and people's opinions and hearing all of those. For me, it's really interesting because I don't have the same kind of knowledge that you have of lore, so I'm definitely learning quite a bit. But again, as we do close this out, make sure if you guys want to see matchups in the future, leave them in the comment section. Let Sotek and I know what you want to see, and if it catches our eye, we'll certainly include it in some later videos. So, guys, thanks again for joining. Sotek, any closing words for the night? Anything you'd like to add?
Just that, remember for next week when we do part 3, at least it'll probably be in a week, give or take.
Yeah.
It'll be over on Turin's channel, not here. We will be alternating, so make sure you catch episode 3 over there. I'll be sure to let you guys know when that happens. And thanks for coming by.
Yeah, thanks for joining tonight, guys, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.